In this video, I'm going to describe how to create and use temporary files and directories on the local file system. The location of temporary files and directories is different depending whether you're working on Windows XP, Windows Vista, or the Mac. But the API in AIR allows you to use exactly the same code to work with these files and directories, no matter which operating system the application is deployed on. For this demonstration, I'll use an application file in the Chapter 04 Begin project named tempdirs and files.mxml. If you're following along with the exercises, open the file in FlexBuilder. The existing application has three methods called closing handler, create tempdir, and create temp file. The create tempdir and create temp file functions are being called upon the click event of two buttons at the bottom of the application. Applications can create temporary directories to hold content that's unique to the individual user and also unique to the current application session. If you're planning on creating more than one temporary file, it's a good idea to put them all in the same directory. Use this code to create a temporary directory as a file object. First of all, place the cursor above the functions and declare a private variable named tempdir, data typed as a file. Don't initialize the object yet, just declare it at the top of the functions. Then go to the create tempdir function and add this code. Tempdir equals file.createTempDirectory. Now, as I mentioned, the actual physical location of this directory is determined partially by the operating system and partially by the Adobe Integrated Runtime. Now, trace the location of the file that was created. Add a trace statement and pass in the value tempdir.nativePath, remembering that the native path property always tells you the actual location and name of a directory or file. Now save and run the application in debug mode. Click the Create Temp Directory button, and you should see in the console in FlexBuilder a listing showing you where the file was created and its name. I'm working on Windows Vista, and on Vista, temporary files are created in an appdata/local/temp folder underneath my home directory. The name of the file starts with FLA and ends with .tmp. If you're working on Windows XP, the location will be similar, but the actual physical location will start with documents and settings instead of users. And if you're working on Mac, it will look very different. The path of the file starts in a directory named private, which is under the volume root, and then continues on with a completely randomized file and directory name. Now, I'm going to be creating some spare files along the way, so you might want to make a note of these files and then go back later and clean them up manually. Because temporary directories and files are not cleaned up automatically by the runtime. It's up to you as the developer to take care of removing them when you're done. And I'll show you how to do that at the end of the exercise. Close the application and return to the source code. The code to create a temporary file is very similar. Place your cursor at the top of the functions and declare a private variable named tempFile, once again data typed as a file. Then go to the createTempFile method. Use this syntax to create a new file. TempFile equals file.createTempFile. This not only creates a reference to the location of the file, but actually creates the file on disk at the same time. Then once again call the trace method and output to the console the location of the new temporary file, using the syntax tempFile.nativePath. Run the application in debug mode. Click the Create Temp File button, and you'll see once again in the console the location and name of the newly created file. Close the application. Now, I'm going to go to my temporary directory and show you that the files have been created. I'm going to select just the directory location under which the file and directory were created, copy that to the clipboard, and then in Windows, I can find that file location easily by going to the Start menu. If you're working on Windows XP, choose the Run option. If you're working on Windows Vista, you can simply paste in the location and press Enter, and that will open the location of that directory in Windows Explorer. Here's the temporary directory that I created, and here's the temporary file. If you're working on Mac OS X, you can follow the same steps. Run the application in debug mode. Then click the buttons to create a temp directory and a temp file. Leaving the application open, go to the console and you'll see the listing of the location of the temporary directory and file. Select the path that prefixes both of those file and directory names, ending with the string temporary items, and then copy that string to the clipboard. Next, switch to Finder. In Finder, go to the menu and select Go to Folder. You can also press the associated keyboard shortcut. Paste that value into the dialog box that appears by pressing Command-V, and then click Go. That should result in displaying the temporary items folder for the current user. You'll see the name of the folder and the name of the file. Now, as I mentioned, when you close down the application, these temporary files and directories are not cleaned up for you. You're responsible for taking care of that. I'm going to manually remove these files from the temp directory, and then close Windows Explorer and come back to FlexBuilder. In order to clean up the temporary files and directories as you close the application, you have to detect that the application is closing. You can do this through an event dispatched by the windowed application component named Closing. I'll be talking about this and other window-based events a lot more in a later chapter all about native Windows. For now, just go to the code, place the cursor right at the end of the windowed application tag, and add an event listener for the closing event. Make sure you've selected the closing event and not the close event. Call the method that's already been created, closing handler, and pass the event object. Now go to the closing handler method and add code to detect whether the temporary directory and temporary file still exist. For the directory, use this syntax: if tempdir.exists, and then within the conditional clause, call tempdir.deleteDirectory and pass in a value of true, meaning that you want to remove all of its contents if there are any. Do the same thing for the file. If tempFile.exists, and then within that conditional block, call the deleteFile method. Finally, at the end of both conditional blocks, add a trace command and indicate when you're debugging temp file and dir deleted. Save your changes and once again run the application in debug mode. Now, to demonstrate this, once I've created the temporary directory and temporary file, I'll open up Windows Explorer side by side with the application so we can see the temporary directory and file and see what happens as the application closes. I'll create the temporary directory and the temporary file. Next, I'll go copy the location to the clipboard, navigate to that location. Again, I'm using Windows Vista, so I can simply paste the location into the Start menu, and I'll sort so I can see the files listed. There's the temporary file. On my system, it was named flabec.temp, and the directory was named fla38c.temp. Now I'm going to move my windows around so we can see both this temp directory and the application at the same time. Now I'll close the application. So notice that the application closes and the file and directory created by the application are gone. So that's how you manage temporary files and directories. Now notice in this particular temporary directory that there are a bunch of files there that start with flex2_. Now those are temporary files that are actually created by FlexBuilder. And to show you the behavior of an application that does a good job of cleaning up after itself, I'll now close FlexBuilder, watching the temporary directory contents, and you'll see that as FlexBuilder closes, everything is deleted from disk.